Let's get the obvious out of the way. Remasters and remakes are extremely popular in the games industry nowadays. Slapping a new coat of paint on some of our most beloved childhood video games as a way to make money has become commonplace. There's nothing inherently wrong with this practice. In fact, some games greatly benefit from it. Longtime fans of a series get to experience a game they know very well in a whole new light, while new fans can experience a beloved legacy game or series with quality of life improvements such as higher graphical fidelity and modernized control schemes. And then there's the other side to all of this that, well, I'll let you decide how egregious it can get. When it comes to Metal Gear, however, I do think there is a benefit to remaking some of the games. Not only for Konami's monetary benefit, obviously, but also for us, the fans. While I'm sure a lot of you are strictly on the no Kojima, no Metal Gear train, I personally am not, and I don't think Konami will ever let such a huge IP die either way. So the best thing we can wish for is that the series is treated with respect through remakes of its most important titles and for any future mainline entries Konami decides to make. Before we get any of those new titles like a Metal Gear Solid 6 or even a spin-off, I do think remakes are the way to go for a few reasons. For one, there is currently a resurgence happening within the series. Whether it be because of Metal Gear Rising's newly found popularity, the recent Fortnite collaboration, the announcement of Delta, or even the Master Collection Volume 1 releasing, people are talking about Metal Gear again. I've seen so many comments originating from new fans in just my own videos alone. Not to mention the Metal Gear Solid subreddit, in which there are at least a few people a day asking where the best place to start is in regard to Metal Gear. I know for a lot of these beginners, the story elements, characters, writing, and some of the stealth action gameplay hold up, but the graphics and control layouts do not. These aspects are where Konami could capitalize with their remakes. But why remake Metal Gear Solid 3 specifically? Well, to go over the most obvious reason first, it's probably the most liked Metal Gear game by most hardcore fans as well as casual fans. And the casual fan part of that sentence is what I want to highlight. Despite Metal Gear Solid 3 not being in the top 3 best-selling Metal Gear titles, it is definitely the game that gets the spotlight on a lot of people's favorite video game of all time lists. Outside of the hardcore Metal Gear fandom, where I'd say rankings and opinions on what the best Metal Gear game is are pretty varied, when you get to the more casual fan base, Metal Gear Solid 3 reigns supreme. I always see this game up there with games such as Ocarina of Time and Final Fantasy VII. It's just the game that most people who say they like Metal Gear tend to gravitate toward, whether it be because it's slightly more modern than Metal Gear Solid 1 but still has that old school Metal Gear feel, or because it's a little easier to wrap your head around compared to Metal Gear Solid 2 when it comes to overall narrative. I've said this many times over the years, but I'll say it again here. Metal Gear Solid 3 is the Metal Gear game you suggest to someone that might have a rough time with the graphics and controls of Metal Gear Solid 1. Now, I know I'm completely underselling Metal Gear Solid 3's story as a whole by saying this, but essentially it boils down to a very easy to understand story about a man who was betrayed by a mentor he cherished and the trials he had to go through to understand why she did what she did. You don't need the entire backstory of Metal Gear Solid 1 or Metal Gear Solid 2 to enjoy Metal Gear Solid 3 or to have its story resonate with you. Of course, the experience will always be better if you play MGS 1 and 2 before MGS 3, and that is something that I always suggest newcomers to the series do. You won't get a lot of the references and nods to the first couple of games, but the story is straightforward enough to be enjoyable for even the most casual of fans or even someone completely new to the series. That fact alone is probably a major contributing factor toward the decision to remake Metal Gear Solid 3 first, but there's definitely more to this decision. Now, I have no real way to back this claim up, but in my opinion, at least as of Metal Gear Solid 5's release, Big Boss has been the more popular Snake. I don't think most longtime fans of the series realize just how many people got into Metal Gear through Metal Gear Solid 5. With that in mind, try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who has only played Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes and The Phantom Pain. Where do you go from there? Sure, you and I may think it's obvious, go play Metal Gear Solid 1. But in reality, it's kind of a hard sell to a lot of newer fans to go from a game that looks and plays like this to a game that looks like this. Remember, you're attempting to view this from the lens of a new player. You loved Metal Gear Solid 5, and now you want some more of this Big Boss guy. You do a little bit of research and find out that Metal Gear Solid 3 allows you to play as Big Boss and is also the genesis of the entire series. It sounds like the perfect game to play next. You can't really blame people for following this train of thought, and I think Konami knows it's a common occurrence. I'd imagine the best aspect of remaking Metal Gear Solid 3 from Konami's perspective is the fact that, well, Metal Gear Solid 3 already exists. Kojima and the original Kojima Productions created a game beloved by so many people all over the world, which means the foundation to a great game is already established by the sheer fact that the original Metal Gear Solid 3 exists. Konami is not making a whole new product here, and I think that's a good thing. You could argue that the same could be said for Metal Gear Solid 1, and that it definitely could use the facelift more than Metal Gear Solid 3. Now, I'm not a game developer at all, but in my very ignorant opinion, I do think that an MGS3 remake is much more feasible and has a much higher chance of being a decent remake over something like Metal Gear Solid 1. MGS1 would have to be remade completely in every single aspect imaginable. There is no way they could take the original version of Shadow Moses or even the MGS4 or Twin Snakes versions and remake them one for one in Unreal Engine 5 like they're doing with Selenoyarsk. At least that's what it looks like they're doing from the very few promotional bits we've seen of Delta. Don't get me wrong, I know both are huge endeavors in their own right. I just personally do not want to see another MGS1 remake fail because it wasn't done right. I would like to see Konami and their supporting studios do a good job on Delta first before handling a potential MGS1 remake or an attempt to add a new mainline game to the franchise. I might be wrong here, but I don't think their intention with Delta is to have the end result be much different from the original MGS3, especially since it's already been confirmed that they're reusing the voice recordings from the original. I don't really think we're going to be treading into Final Fantasy VII Remake territory here, but what do I know? I just cannot see Konami taking any major risks with such an important game, especially when you consider the fact that this is their first real outing when it comes to remaking Metal Gear. I know for a fact that they know just how cutthroat fans of their series can be. You don't need to look much further than the Silent Hill 2 remake to see that no matter what, some fans will be let down by a remake of any kind. If they stray too far from the original game in terms of story, art direction, or even combat in the case of Silent Hill 2, fans will claim that the game is now ruined, that it's copying other successful games and remakes in the same genre, and that the artist's original vision has been corrupted. If they in turn make a one-for-one remake and all they do is pretty the game up in a new engine, fans will be upset that it's not different enough from the original game and they will call it a pointless remake. Whichever side of the coin you fall on, I think in the specific situation we find ourselves in as Metal Gear fans, the lesser of two evils is definitely the way to go. Even if the remake turns out horribly, we still have the original Metal Gear Solid 3 to play whenever we want to. What the series does not need right now, in my opinion of course, is Metal Gear Solid 6 without the fundamental and foundational knowledge of what a Metal Gear game should look, feel, and play like. If you think about it, what I just described is Metal Gear Survive, a game created by the old Kojima Productions veterans, the ones that didn't end up leaving with Kojima that is, in an attempt to make something to further familiarize themselves with the Fox engine and also to make something Metal Gear themed without Kojima himself at the helm. Obviously, if you ask most fans, they'd say that attempt failed, which is why sticking to remaking games until they're confident in what they're doing is the right move. I know there are a lot of people out there that would prefer the series just die now that Kojima is no longer involved. I get that sentiment, I really do. I have never shared the desire to see my favorite franchise die, however. From the moment after MGS2 launched, Kojima has been wanting to hand the series over to the next generation, to someone younger and with their own vision for what Metal Gear should be. I don't think he's ever expressed that he would want Metal Gear to stop if he were to move on to something else like he has now done. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. If anything, he still to this day has hope that someone will take Metal Gear and usher in a new golden era for the series. I share that same hope, and I'm crossing my fingers that Delta is the first step toward that future. For now, I'll be here to cover whatever Metal Gear content Konami decides to release, for better or worse. By the way, if you haven't heard, Kojima is planning to return to the action espionage genre with a game he's codenamed Fizzant. If you want to learn more, check out this video I made where I covered the announcement he made. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.